Hey everyone, welcome to a short video tutorial series on the first-person body and body awareness features in NeoFPS. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Animator controller that the first-person body demo uses, just so I can show you the different blend trees and things like that. There are a few things that stand out as a little bit interesting, mainly to do with sliding on slopes and things like that. The Animator controller itself is fairly simple. It doesn't have animations currently for things like swimming or wall running. However, it does have all of the basics of locomotion that you're going to need. It does have def animations, and it does have jumping and falling and all that type of stuff. And then if you want to add more on top of that, hopefully this and the next video showing the motion graph and how they tie together should explain how it works. And then if you need a better understanding of Animator controllers as a whole, I have a separate video tutorial series covering Animator controllers for the firearm system. But a lot of the concepts for that apply directly here as well. So anyway, here we are. This is the root of the Animator, which is currently we're looking at the Kobold character animator controller here. So this is in, well, once you've extracted the demo package, this will be in NeoFPS, samples, single player, scenes, feature demos, first person body, and then the Kobold subfolder. So yeah. What we have at the root here is relatively simple. It has a locomotion subgraph. So this is where all of the walking and the sprinting and the crouch movement is. We have falling. So this is a blend between falling and crouch falling. We have sliding, again, blend trees. And we have a simple mantle and then a def animation. So first up, let's dig into the locomotion subgraph. And you can just have a look at how this is set up. So if we expand out here the blend tree for walk crouch blend, this is actually split into two separate blend trees here, and then we blend between them. So one of them is the walking, and this one is the crouching. So this is driven by, if we look at parameters, this character height here. So if I can open up the preview and hit play. So this is in the idle because we're currently crouching and character height seems to have defaulted down quite a bit. Hit the slider. There we go. So standing, crouching. And then we can do the parameters for forward and strafe, which is these two float parameters here on the Animator controller. So let's hit play. We get the forward movement, the backward movement, and then so it's roughly 0 again. And then we get the strafing. And yeah, we have different combinations of that. And then as we go to walk, we have the forwards, we have the backwards, and strafing, and so on. So one of the reasons that the Kobold animations were a perfect fit as well is that we actually have this rifle animation with the left shoulder forwards. Most of the other animation packs that I found, a lot of the movement involved like the shoulders squared forwards. So as you're holding one of the weapons, because the weapon animations that we have in the demos are generally done through IK, the weapon would be placed on the right shoulder, and then the left arm would be reaching for the foregrip of the rifle, for example, and actually just wouldn't be able to reach. Whereas here, the right shoulder is pulled back, the left shoulder's forwards, so it's much easier for the IK to do its job of matching the hand positions and things like that as we're going. But yeah. That's just a simple example of that. If we have a look at the actual blend trees here, then these are pretty simple. We just have idle, the different walk forward and backward loops, and so forth. And you can see them here as well. So it's a Cartesian freeform blend. And then we just have, for example, forwards is just 1 in the position Y, so that's the forward parameter. -1 is the backwards one, obviously. And then roughly 45-degree rotation of 1 on the two axes is 0.7. So just done 0.7 minus 0.7 would be 0.7 minus 0.7. So that's the strafe forwards and left here. There's that one. There we go. And the same goes for the crouching as well. Exactly the same stuff. Now if we go up a level, then we have the sprinting. As you can see here, there's a lot more states going on than we saw with the actual walk or the crouch here. And the main reason for this is that I have added the walk animations in here as well. So you can see the outer ring here. This is, for example, forward 1, strafe 0 here is the run forward. So that's this one. If we highlight that, there we go. So as we whack the forwards up to 1, you can see that that's highlighted here with the ring around it. So what I've done is, for when people are using a game controller and the analog stick, I've just made it so that instead of blending from idle up to sprint, it blends from idle to walk in a very short distance, and then from walk to sprint. So if you're holding the sprint button and you're holding forwards, to some extent, you're going to get something that feels a lot more like a sprint than just like a halfway house between sprinting and standing still, which is just a bit weird. You don't have to do it like this. This is purely an example. But yeah, you can see here, wherever we've got the 1, -1, for example, of the running forwards and backwards, I've done 0.1 minus 0.1 for the walking. So essentially divide by 10 for each of the different diagonals and the straights to get you that there. And as you can see, as we blend in and out, we get, when you're not touching the analog, you're essentially stationary. Yeah, but then as soon as you actually start moving it a bit, you're going to start at walking and work your way up to sprinting. Next up, we'll have a quick look at the falling. So this is dead simple. This is purely just a little loop here that you can see with the hands and the feet just wobbling a little bit as you're falling. The reason that it doesn't have like a full animation sequence of the squat down, the jump off, then the falling, and then the landing, and then the stepping forwards from that, is that you want in an FPS especially for the movements to be very, very reactive. If you were to hit jump and the character was then to like squat down and then push off, that's going to be a half second of movement that is out of your control and where you're not jumping. That's just not going to feel like good, solid gameplay. So most first-person games will instead just switch directly to the falling animation. They might have like a little push-off kind of blend right at the very first frame or something like that. But it's going to be something that's nearly instantaneous instead of what you would get in a real-world movement, or what you might get in a third-person game that's trying to get that more convincing movement. So anyway, the blend here is falling crouch to falling. So again, this is one that I couldn't find a decent equivalent for in a lot of the animation packs out there. And what you're seeing here is essentially, because of the shape of the movement, because of the shape of the character capsule, when they jump and they're falling, you want them to tuck the legs up. You want the camera, which is the head, essentially to stay in the same place. So here they are standing, that's where the head would be normally as well. And then when they jump in the air, you want them to pull the lower legs up and just fly. Whereas the falling crouch, so NeoFPS uses crouch jumping, which is essentially where you pull the character collider up from the bottom instead of squashing the height of it down. So this is used in games like Half-Life and Halo, where when you run and jump at a ledge, you tuck the legs up and you can fly over it. Whereas otherwise, you'll get the head pop down and you would just still hit it as though you'd been standing the whole time. And in order for it to reflect that, you now need the head at the correct position for if their character was crouching. So that's all this is here. This is just the blend between the two. Is just positioning the head in the correct position, and then the body is just relative to that. I hope that makes sense. Next up, we have steep slide blend. So this one is just a static pose. You can see here the loop is just a single frame, and the blend is just the different angles. So this is vertical. This is, I think, 45 degrees. Yeah, there we go, 45, 90. And the blend is just doing that. So as you're sliding, the motion graph will work out the slope that you're sliding down, and it will just send that parameter to the Animator controller here. So this is slide slope. Where's that? There it is. Similarly, if we were to look at the slide blend, we have the flat slide, which is just flat ground. So then we look at the blend tree here. We have this, which is the slide slope. So just as with the steep slide, The motion graph will detect the angle of the ground that you're on and send that to the animator controller. But we also have direction here, which is used like minus 180 to 180 degrees. So this gives you different angles that you're sliding along the ground. So for example, if you're sliding across a slope rather than down or up a slope, then you're on 90 degrees, like so. So 45 degrees, like that. And yeah, there we go, that's the slides. So again, I couldn't find anything equivalent to that in one of the animation packs out there, so I just knocked out these simple kind of one-frame idles that do that. And we can have a look at those in action in a second. The dead state is just one of the Kobold animation ones. So if we have a look at that, it's just buff. You could add as many of those as you like, do different directional depths and things like that as well, or even switch to ragdoll and the camera should match as you go down. But currently I just have a simple setup that is when the health manager goes, "You're dead," it just sets a Boolean on the animator controller here. And then the climbing. Yes, the mantling is a little bit dodgy at the moment. We've got this climb 2 meter animation here, which comes from the Kobold animation pack. But matching the hand placement and the movement with the motion graph is quite tricky. So I want to look at different ways of doing that in the future. But it's going to be a little while before I have a nicer solution for this one. But yeah. Yeah, anyway, that's the animator controller. I'll just quickly show you the actual in-game slides so you can have a look at that in action. So if we're running along and we have the flat slide here, there you go, you can see that in action. And then we can hop on the teleporter up here. Come on. If we go for one of the steeper ones, like, yeah, 60 degrees will be fine. We just hop on that, whoop, and then you can see it sliding down. There we go. So yeah, the demo animator will grow over time. My main priority at the moment is AI, so it's going to be a little bit while before it actually has another iteration on it. But adding in things like the swimming, the ladder climbing, things like that, they are things that I definitely want to get done at some point soon. Now, one other thing to touch on with the animator controllers that I don't really make a big deal of in the demos here is how the weapon animations actually tie into this. So with the demos, we have a couple of different ones. We have the full body, and the way that this one works is that the weapon animations are a part of the weapons themselves. I'm using the demo weapons from NeoFPS, which were not built for full body. They were built to be attached to the camera with the arms built in. So the way that we're actually tying that to the character itself is by using inverse kinematics on the character to match its hands to the position of the hands on the weapon. That means that your character doesn't actually need any weapon animations itself. You're just using animations from the guns. You essentially then just hide the skin mesh that's attached to the gun, so you can't see any arms built into that. And the arms from your character is what you will see in their place. There is a whole system for that we'll go through in the full body setup video, because that's the place that it's used. And then in the other ones, so in the legs and torso character video and in the split rig video, we are just using the animations from the weapons themselves. The arms in both cases are either synced to or actually built into the weapons, so there's no need to tie into the body like that. But one thing that you can do, which, again, like I say, is not done in the demos here because I just don't have the actual animations and the resources to show this off, is that you could set up your weapons to send their animation parameters to the animator on the weapon itself and the animator on the character. So, for example, your shoot triggers, your reload trigger, your draw and your holster triggers and things like that can all be sent to the character as well. And what you would do in that situation is you would create a separate layer here, a separate animation layer. So let's just add one as a test, call this upper body. and you would use an avatar mask, which would mask everything above the hips. And this would mean that your locomotion, your leg movement, and things like that were all essentially done using the base layer, and this layer handles your upper body. And then you can set the weight to 1 when the weapon's raised, and if you deselect any weapons, so you're just going with, so you've got nothing at all, you set it down to 0, and the arm animations from the base layer will take over. Yeah, and then just as with the base layer, how we have all of this driven by the different parameters here, you would drive your weapon parameters at this point on. So if you were to add in here, as with the firearm animator controllers, things like your holster, your draw, your shoot, your reload, then you can override those animation clips later on. And the way that we do this with NeoFPS is, if I just show you a simple version of the setup, is we can create NeoFPS, and we have, where is it? First person character animation profile. So the first thing that we want is an animator controller. So let's go for the template one, which is, where are you? This one. Drag that in there. We hit check clips, just to make sure that it's got them all listed. And now, if we click on the plus on the animation clips here, this will list all of the animation clips that are attached to this animator controller. Now, the reason that you do this, instead of just using Unity's built-in animator override controllers, is that generally a lot of the animations in this character are going to be things to do with locomotion that you don't want your weapons to touch. And it just gets complicated when you're actually trying to pick out which animations to swap out, digging through and finding out, oh, here's the reload stub animation and things like that. So instead, what you can do here is we can say, for example, I don't know, stub idle. And this will allow us to name it how we want. So say that was fire. And we could add something else and call that reload, and so on and so forth. And then in our weapons, later on, let's just break some weapons here for a laugh. We can add we can add this thing here, the wieldable item body anim overrides. So this means that this weapon, which is a wieldable item, has various overrides attached. So we drop in wherever it's gone, this, whoop, and this just lists out the 2 that we added in here. So that's the regular one. Oh, where's it gone? There it is, boom. So the fire and the reload are now listed as fire and reload, and we can drop in the animation clips that we want there. What that means is that when you select this weapon, like the moment that it activates this weapon, it will send those animation clips as overrides to your character, and the character's upper body, in this case, which is what we want, will start using those animations instead. And the reason that you might want to do this, I mean, you could want to do it to sync the upper body animations to your weapon animations, but more than likely you're going to want to do this to do either a shadow caster or a multiplayer remote character. So you're going to want to send animator parameters to your character's animator, which are synced over the network. So when you're looking at another character, you're not seeing their first-person weapon, you're not seeing their arms IK'd to that. What you're seeing instead is the character animations that are being sent via these overrides, and then simplified weapons, and so on and so forth. Or if, for example, we are talking about the torso and legs body, where your arms are built into your weapon, then those arms are going to move a little bit weirdly compared to your body as you move the camera around. So as you look up and down, essentially the shoulders are going to be disconnected from the torso because they're completely separate geometry. So your shadow, as you look at the ground, is going to be a bit broken up. Now, by default in the demos, I switch off the shadow for first-person weapons or for the character that's torso and legs. But what you could do instead is use these overrides to send a full body animations, and then use shadow casting and visible geometry to actually cast correct shadows. Your animations might look a tiny bit different, like if you were to really watch your hands moving and then the shadow in the same view, you might see a difference. There's been memes about this in games since early Battlefields, for example. But it's just a vastly simplified way of doing it. Yeah, I thought I would just point out this Yeah, the other thing that you need to do once you have this here is if we look at the modular firearm itself, and the same goes for the melee weapons, the thrown weapons, the wieldable tools, then here we have this animation section and animator location. And we can select attached and character. And this means that the different modules attached to the firearm will send its parameters to the character as well as to the animator that's attached to the gun itself, therefore triggering the different animations. So yeah, I thought I'd just point that one out. It's not really demoed, but it is like a very powerful system that's added on. And for anybody that, for example, is trying to take on adding multiplayer to NeoFPS, this is kind of the basis of what that system is going to require for syncing up your remote characters' animations and things like that. If you're just purely to rely on first-person animations for your remote characters, then you're either going to end up with remote characters that look a bit weird because the arms and things are in random places, or you're going to end up with your first-person view looking a bit stupid because your animations are really constrained to this realistic proportions and things like that. FPS games, since they were a thing, have not worried about your body. Like, your weapon is framed to the camera, and the viewpoint is not framed to your real character's body and its shoulders and things like that. So, yeah, this is how you would achieve that. Anyway, I hope I didn't get too far off track there, and I hope that helped. So yeah, hopefully that was useful. Next video, we will take a look at the motion graph setup for this, and then we'll get on to the characters. Okay, so see you in the next one.